come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'm going to provide a bit of a page through and review Tyranny of Dragons from Wizards of the Coast and Kobold Press for Dungeons and Dragons. So, is this a major reworking and revamping of the initial 5th edition D&D campaign, or is this simply a celebratory cash grab by the company? You'll find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. So, as I mentioned in the open, I'm going to page through and review Tyranny of Dragons, which, as I mentioned previously, is for Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast with an assist by Kobold Press. This is written by Wolfgang Bauer, Steve Winter, and Alexander Winter. The 224-page hardcover will arrive in stores on October 22nd. It will carry an MSRP of $49.95. So let's swing on over to the other camera and start taking a look. All right, here we've got Tyranny of Dragons for Dungeons and Dragons. And I want to point out, originally, back in 2014, back in August, the first part of this campaign arrived on the scene, Horde of the Dragon Queen. In fact, this was a Gen Con release. And then it was followed up in November with The Rise of Tiamat. An interesting side note is that when Horde of the Dragon Queen, in fact, even when The Rise of Tiamat arrived, only 2 of the 3 core books were out. We had the Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual were both out. In fact, I want to say the Monster Manual arrived the same month that Horde of the Dragon Queen did. But there was still no Dungeon Master's Guide available when both Horde of the Dragon Queen as well as Rise of Tiamat hit the scene. So the way I understand it, and I may not necessarily have all the info correct, but Kobold Press got involved with Wizards of the Coast because Wizards of the Coast was not sure that they were going to be able to get a big adventure out there in time for what was effectively the launch of 5th edition. So they had Wolfgang Bauer, Steve Winter, and Alexander Winter produce this campaign. So in reality, the creatives for this entire campaign came from Kobold Press, not necessarily Wizards of the Coast. And I think one of the reasons why I have an issue with this campaign, even with this new edition where some things have been kind of cleaned up, kind of revamped a little bit, is that all in all, I think there was a bit of a disconnect with what was 5th edition going to be when this adventure was created. And that led to quite a few of the problems that the original books had, especially with Horde of the Dragon Queen, as far as, especially like challenge level with some of the encounters. In fact, even the way the adventure starts off is it's just kind of crazy. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So early on, we've got a bit of information as far as using this book, using the adventure, talking about the different factions that are out there. I'm going to try to keep this relatively spoiler-free, simply because I know there are people out there who, when they pick this book up, this is going to be their first exposure to Tyranny of Dragons. We can't always assume, just because this campaign is going on 5 years old, that everyone's familiar with it. Now, that being said, I'm not going to keep this completely spoiler-free, because that wouldn't make sense for those out there who are already own Horde of the Dragon Queen and the Rise of Tiamat, trying to decide, hey, so do I want to pick up this special collector's edition or not? So the adventure, the whole campaign kicks off. Player characters find themselves outside this town that's being attacked by kobolds and cultists and a blue dragon, which to me kind of throws me. Uh, I guess it's one of the problems that I have with this whole campaign is that once again, all this is simply my opinion, but in my opinion, dragons should be marvelous and just magnificent and terrifying, as opposed to, well, you've got first level characters and boom, oh look, there's a blue dragon. Now, of course, granted, they can't attempt to fight the blue dragon because they'll basically be vaporized being first level characters. But I sort of I when I do a fantasy role playing game, I like to keep the dragons kind of just off, like they're not super common, things like that. I know it's just me, but still. Plus there's like this half dragon champion right here, which I don't know, to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But one of the big issues that has actually been remedied in this new edition is right off the bat, you had all these kobolds and all these different encounters in Greenest, which is the town, which would pretty much just completely do a total party kill on first level characters. So if you would run it as written, so now there's been some tweaks to it that the kobolds aren't necessarily all that focused on the first level characters. So another thing that I will point out is we do have this all broken down into chapters now. It's been chapterized as opposed to just having parts. I know a lot of people kind of complained about the campaign because it wasn't in chapters. It was just in big chunks. And personally, that didn't really bother me all that much. But I can see where people like to have things in chapters because it's kind of like, oh, I can probably squeeze this chapter into a session this coming weekend and kind of have, okay, so I know where I'm going to do like a little bit of a cliffhanger. I do want to point out that especially early on, especially the first book, Hoard of the Dragon Queen, this is really, really a railroad. There is not a lot of variety. There are not a lot of contingency plans. Well, if the players do this, this happens. Also, and this is kind of a problem I see with quite a lot of 5th edition D&D, some of the skill rolls are not necessarily incorporated very well. I'm not a big fan of make this skill roll and you get this information or you get whatever, but if you don't, then I'm just going to introduce this, what you needed in the first place by passing that skill roll. I'm going to hand it over to you at a later point or through some other contrivance. And to me, that's sort of like, well, then what's the point of actually having a skill roll in the first place? That's silly. I think that's just simply silly. So I do like the artwork. I think the quality of this book is really well done. Really, really do like the page weight, the paper weight. I love the fact that it's got the matte cover, and the cover is by Hydro74, who I will be the first to admit that I have not necessarily been a huge fan of Hydro74's artwork on some of the alternate covers for some releases that have come out, but I do like this one. I do like the artwork as well. I think the artwork is nicely done for the most part. Some of it starts to get a little redundant looking and doesn't really stand out. One other aspect I will say is, for some strange reason, and maybe it's just because of the way this paper is, that some of the artwork looks kind of muted or kind of muddied or a little dull, as opposed to really jumping out at you. So, not a huge problem, but some of the pop that this artwork would probably have can be a little lost with this paper. I do like the cartography. I like the maps. I think those are very nicely done. The main problem I really have with this campaign is it's kind of a by the numbers. In fact, when I first reviewed Hoard of the Dragon Queen, I pointed out that the whole premise of the adventure, which effectively the player characters are trying to travel around and find pieces well, I'm not, like I said, I'm going to keep this spoiler free, but they're trying to assemble these pieces to keep them out of the hands of these cultists, these dragon cultists. And it just smacked of like a Call of Cthulhu adventure almost. It was sort of like, wow, you guys are taking your lead from kind of a very tropey Call of Cthulhu sort of adventure, or even a lot of kind of hackneyed fantasy literature out there. Oh, find these five pieces of whatever, that kind of stuff. So I will point out the Rise of Tiamat, I personally thought was a bit better than Horde of the Dragon Queen. Just a little more varied. Still did not find that this was fantastic, though. And once again, you're going to have plenty of dragons in here. You've got all these different dragons. And some people will love this. Me, or I'm a little more of a traditionalist, I'm a little more old school. I kind of think that, you're kind of taking the real excitement actually battling dragons or actually being around dragons in a game, kind of leeching some of that excitement away. Once again, like I said, just my opinion. This is the kind of artwork that kind of starts losing its effect, because you'll see that there's a lot of this character artwork that is very, very similar. The colors become very similar as well. And that's what I was talking about, where some of the artwork seems a little redundant. And I think really the problem is not necessarily with the artwork itself. I think it's because of the paper. And when this artwork is produced, it just has this muted look where the blues all look very similar. The purples look very similar. So I don't know, just me. I just, my eyes catching that. I'm sure it might not stand out to other people, but for myself, it does sort of look like, oh, is this the same artwork I just saw a few chapters back? And it's not, but it just kind of sort of looks like that. All right, so I do want to point out that your characters will start at first level. If they complete the entire campaign, they are looking at about 15th or 16th level. So there is loads and loads of room for your characters to advance in this book. We're almost to the point where we're going to wrap this up. See, once again, just the purples are all the same kind of purple. That's sort of what I'm talking about with the artwork, or at least that artwork. It's like the artwork like this pops. I like how I think this looks really nice. Once again, a little dull, a little muted, but I think that's due to the actual printing process on this paper. All right, so we're getting to the conclusion here, which, of course, obviously enough, you're trying to prevent the return of Tiamat. Why else would the second part be called Rise of Tiamat? Right. I guess I'm not giving away any spoilers there. So then we get into some of the backgrounds. We'll get into some of the magic items as well. So we get a bit of a background template. One of the aspects that I found a little lacking throughout both parts, both Horde of the Dragon Queen and the Rise of Tiamat, is some of the treasures for some of the big bosses, big baddies, I guess we'll say, were kind of lame. I mean, we do have some magic items, some new magic items. Some of the big bads, their treasure payout basically for the characters don't really have magic items, or if they do have magic items, the magic items are pretty meh. I would have liked to have seen a little more creativity with some of the magic items, not just, the typical book stuff, +1 sword, +2 leather armor, things like that. We do get some new monsters as well as stat blocks for important NPCs. And we do see some of the artwork is repeated in here, which actually doesn't bother me because it actually helps you when you're like, oh, where are the stat blocks for so-and-so? And then, of course, we get Tiamat. I like this art. I thought that's pretty cool. I like that. Then we get into the concept gallery. And I find this kind of a mixed bag. I like the fact that we do get some concept art. I appreciated that in Descent in Avernus. Here we get some comic book artwork. So in reality, I don't think this is actually concept art. This strikes me as this is artwork that was completed after the fact. And I think far too many pages are devoted to this concept gallery than needed. If we started from here, where we really are seeing concept art, we're seeing sketch work, seeing different artwork and different characters kind of take life. This I think is pretty cool. All in all, there are 32 pages of concept gallery, and honestly, I think 20 pages could have been shaved off. 15 pages could have been shaved off. I would have liked to have seen actual gameable material taking up those 15 pages. But I like this. I think this is very cool. I like to see this. It's just like the comic book stuff. That's where I was kind of like, really? I mean, come on. The different dragons. I thought this was very cool. I like that. That's why I'm saying it's kind of a mixed bag. I have mixed feelings about this concept gallery in the book. All right, so that finishes up the 224 pages of Tyranny of Dragons. I've shared some of my thoughts about this, so let's swing back over to the other camera and I will summarize my thoughts and give you my final review score. All right, so let's recap pretty quickly, and I'll provide my final thoughts and review score for Tyranny of Dragons. This is kind of a tricky review because, keeping in mind, this is just my opinion, right? I know a lot of people get ticked off about reviews, but reviews are just simply one person's opinion. And that opinion is usually based on a lot of things, especially that reviewer's experience. So, how you feel about Tyranny of Dragons is going to be determined by how long you've been playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, the sort of dungeon master you have, and the approach you actually take and your group takes to playing D&D. So this is a mixed bag. There's good and bad. And most of the bad is simply carryover from the original books. Number one, it's just not that great a campaign. Anyway, so let's talk first off about the good. First of all, I got to say, the quality of this book, the weight of the page, the actual page weight, I mean, the paper is really nice. I love the matte finish. I like the matte finish as opposed to the really shiny finish that we normally see on like a standard D&D release. Although I have to point out, this is the only cover for this. This is not an alternate cover. This is the cover for the collector's edition of Tyranny of Dragons. But anyway, love the quality of the book. I think it's really, really nicely done. Like most of the artwork, a vast majority of the artwork. One thing, the paper does kind of lead to a bit of a muted or muddy feel, or look, I should say, to the artwork. But all in all, I like the vast majority of artwork. Some of it is a little redundant, but I really do actually like that. I also appreciate the fact that the folks over at Wizards of the Coast went in and they cleaned up and tried to polish up some of the really rough edges that were in the campaign originally, especially from Hoard of the Dragon Queen, which is the book that I really disliked or just wasn't knocked out by when it first originally came out. So I do appreciate that. There are some additions to this as well that were not in the original. So I like that, especially with the plots that the cult has to try to take the characters out. I like that. I thought that was pretty cool. And I appreciate that some of the encounters that were just out of whack as far as challenge ratings have been fixed as well. That said, I never thought this was a very good campaign to start with. It's really by the numbers, and especially the first half is just a complete railroad. And I know folks out there some folks out there, I should say, feel that part of the social agreement that you have, kind of the social contract you have with your dungeon master, is that you're going to railroad us, right? We're just going to follow your lead, and we're playing D&D tonight. In some ways, I guess that works. In other ways, that's not how I grew up with role-playing games. I prefer a little more sandbox to my game, a few more contingency plans in place to basically cover what happens if the players decide to go off the rails. Not so much in here. This is pretty much cut and dried, point A, point B, point C, point D, so on and so forth. So, like I said, not really that great a campaign to start off with, especially the way it starts off in the first half. Just not a fan. But that's, once again, that's just me. I know there are plenty of people out there who really enjoyed Tyranny of Dragons when it first came out. You know, everybody's different. So, something else I'm not real thrilled with is the addition of all the concept art. I like the concept art to a point. I don't need 30 plus pages of concept art. It it doesn't do anything. I would rather have had some of those pages devoted to fresh gaming content. That's what I would have liked to have seen. In fact, to be very honest, what I would like to have seen for the celebration of the 5th anniversary of 5th edition arriving was something along the lines of Tales from the Yawning Portal. Maybe if Wizards of the Coast had come around and taken some of the old classic adventures, and there are still plenty of them out there from the various editions of D&D, and ported them over to 5th edition, I think that would have been a hell of a lot more enticing than simply getting Tyranny of Dragons. So like I said, it's a mixed bag. Some people will like this, some people will dislike it. If you're new to D&D, I will recommend you pick it up. Because for one, I don't think you can really get Hoard of the Dragon Queen anymore. It's not even advertised on the Wizards of the Coast website for D&D. Rise of Tiamat is, Hoard of the Dragon Queen is not. So I don't know if it's still in print or not. It might not be. So this could be your only opportunity to pick up the Tyranny of Dragons campaign altogether, right? You don't want to pick up Rise of Tiamat without Hoard of the Dragon Queen. So if you're new to D&D, yes, I would say you can pick it up. I mean, it's not a horrible adventure. Don't get me wrong. It's just, I don't know. It just doesn't jump out and grab me. And I feel that what we've seen in the past few years from Dungeons and Dragons, those adventures just really blow this out of the water. So there is that, especially, adventures like Tomb of Annihilation. We've got Strahd, even Dungeon of the Mad Mage and Waterdeep Heist, Dragon Heist. That was it called? What? Huh? So yeah. So I mean, even Descent into Avernus, which I thought was pretty good. I didn't think it was great. Thought it was pretty good. They'll blow this out of the water. But if you are new to D&D, this makes a halfway decent introduction to it. Although Dungeon Masters out there are still going to have to put in some work to really make this shine. If you have already picked up Hoard of the Dragon Queen or Rise of Tiamat, I really can't recommend picking this up unless you're a completist. Honestly, there's no reason for it. The changes that were made in here are not so vast and such huge improvements over what was originally released that it's worth another $50 purchase. I don't see that whatsoever. So on a scale of 1 to 10, making all things even, right? I have to give this a 6 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. I mean, it's all right, is how I look at it. The book is nice. The art is nice. I like how some of the changes that were made. I like now that everything's in chapters rather than just one big book. Boom. There we go. I like all that. I like some of the concept art that was introduced and things like that. Still, all in all, it's not a very inspiring adventure. It's pretty much by the numbers, and it's way too much of a railroad for my personal taste. All right, so there you have it. There's my review of Tyranny of Dragons. So let me remind you, be sure to join me Mondays through Fridays live here on YouTube for the Daily Dope at 7 p.m. Central Time as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. Of course, do want to also mention, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you disagree, by all means, comment down below. Keep it nice, don't get crazy. But if you disagree with my opinion, share your thoughts. I appreciate that. Anyway, if you have not subscribed to the Gaming Gang channel, by all means, please do. And if you do, don't forget, ring that little bell, because not only will it inform you when I upload new videos, say like this, it'll also inform you when the Daily Dope goes live. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until next time, happy trails. Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-boo-boo. Zoo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-boo. Za-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-bum. Zip-it. Whoa, hey. I didn't realize that you were still here. Well, if that's the case, then allow me to share the following information with you that I only have 20 seconds to do. So let's all take a deep breath. So, if you would like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, please click right here. If you want to check out the latest episode of The Daily Dope, click right here. And if you'd like to check out a randomly selected standalone video, by all means, click right here. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and thanks for watching.